We're live for another week of the Rad and Norty Show, getting into all things interesting going on around the world, talking about the brain, the spine, and everything in between. Welcome to the show. We're joined by a guest this week, a very good friend of mine that's going to talk about all kinds of interesting things. We've been catching up just in the last 15 minutes as we've been waiting to come online and already covered everything from video games to residency to AI technology. So we got more of it coming at you. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back. And we're live. All right. Karthik, welcome to the Rad and Norty Show. It's great to have you. Thanks for joining us. You're
glad to be here.
Listener and now guest. So, what's been going on in your life, kind of current events, and obviously tell the audience a little bit about who you are, what you're doing in life, maybe where you came from, how you got to where you are. You don't need to ramble on forever, but, give everybody out there that doesn't know Karthik a little bit of a background of who you are, a little biography for us.
So, broad strokes. Ryan and I were in the same medical school class together. So I'm still up in New York now doing radiology. It's been a great time. Just finished second year into third year, which has been amazing. Otherwise, big things in my life. Actually, just about to go on vacation at the end of this week.
Oh, where are you going?
Sicily for 2 weeks.
Wow. Who are you going with? Or are you just traveling by yourself? Or
Yeah, a bunch of friends from intern year. So
a bunch of friends from intern.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically recreating White Lotus season 2.
All right. So you did your internship at Memorial Sloan Kettering.
That's right.
And that was just a general internal medicine internship.
Exactly. Primarily internal medicine. We had a month of surgery here and there, and then some ER time.
Yeah. Did you rotate over at New York Presbyterian, or was it
our ER rotation was over there.
Got it. Well, that would make sense. MSK doesn't really have an ER. They've got like an acute care center or something like that.
Yeah.
So what was your internship experience like? Was it like you were same as every other internal medicine resident, or since you were more of a transitional resident, was it a different experience from the internal medicine ongoers, or what were your co-residents? What did they end up doing kind of after that year?
So like a lot of people at Sloan, they end up rotating out from other places. So like from Cornell, from downstate, different hospitals. And so when we're actually on the medicine floors, it's basically the same. So even though we're transitional year interns, we're doing pretty much all the same rotations that they are as they're coming through. The only difference is they'll just be there for 3 weeks, a month, whereas we'll be on that rotation for some time, but then we'll go to another floor rotation, whereas they'll go back to their main hospital.
Mm-hmm. So
definitely very different on the inpatient side versus what I do now. Like on the radiology side, depending on what you're doing, there's not as much direct, like face-to-face patient contact, whereas last year that was almost entirely what it was.
Mm-hmm. What do you like better? I mean, I feel like as a radiologist that maybe that kind of speaks for itself, but like, do you miss the patient contact, or is it kind of nice?
I do miss it sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just nice being able to see someone face-to-face. There is like a lot to be learned by just like talking to someone, seeing what their experience has been like with everything that they've gone through, how they've gone through the medical system, versus on the other side in radiology, like having that experience is helpful because it's kind of important to remember that anytime you're reading a scan, there's somebody on the other side of that who the results matter to a lot.
And on that note, I had to step away. My cat knocked over a plant, so I apologize.
As cats do.
But yeah, he'll do that. But
I was asking for it.
What drove you to pursue a career in radiology? Was there a driving force? Was it just something that caught your eye as you were going through school? Talk to us about that.
Honestly, for a while, I thought I wanted to do orthopedic surgery. Like, I enjoyed the musculoskeletal system, enjoyed the injuries, enjoyed just doing things with my hands. But radiology just appealed to like very different parts of me. Like, it's mostly like cognitive focus, like thinking through problems, trying to find exactly what's wrong on a scan, trying to reconcile that with any history you're given about why a patient's in the hospital or in the ER or what they're complaining of. And so like putting that together just I found was more satisfying for me. And like also on the other side, there's just like also opportunities to do procedures, to be more patient facing if that's what you're interested in radiology. And so I figured, all right, this is a great fit for my personality, love the people in it. And so went for it.
I remember in medical school you had interest in interventional radiology. Is that still an interest of yours? Is that the path you're on, or do you think it's going to be more diagnostic? Where I guess what is grow? I don't want to say grown up. You still got ways to go. What does the adolescent professional car think? Where's life taking you?
Yeah, funny you should mention that. I actually just finished with my interventional rotation about a month ago. I actually loved it. Still love doing procedures, love the hands-on time. It's definitely a very different lifestyle and workflow.
Yeah.
And so, like, what I think it taught me was that if I do want to do one of the subspecialties that has more procedures in it, but I don't think I want to go for the interventional route itself.
Did you do? Go ahead, Josh.
I was-
I have a feeling I know what your question is.
I
Go
want to
ahead.
know what all the different
Yeah.
subclass of radiology are. Like what
Oh, yeah.
what options are available? Because this is something like I hear radiology, I had to look up what it was, even though I was like, I know that word, I know that's a thing.
Traditional
look it up.
radiology.
People sometimes ask, "Oh, so are
Yeah.
you the one who takes the images?
Right.
Are you a tech? Are you a nurse?" Like, nope, very different than that.
Yeah. So fill us in about
Yeah.
the whole world a little bit more and what the different branches are.
So, like within radiology, you can do basically any body system. So, you can specialize in the brain and spine, which is neuroradiology. You can specialize in just the musculoskeletal system. So, like the spine and the extremities. You can go for just the chest and cardiac. You can go for the body, which is just abdominal and everything below the diaphragm. You can also just do entirely pediatrics, which covers a little bit of everything, just in patients up to about 20 years old. And like even within radiology, you can specialize just on mammography. So breast itself is its own fellowship.
Gotcha.
And then obviously you have all the interventional stuff.
Yeah.
That's pretty. I mean, that's a breakdown of all the diagnostic.
Mhm.
What
And
about
then interventional is its own beast where
Yeah,
it's
can you kind of? I
basically
mean, obviously,
minimally invasive
I've got a good
image-guided
sense for it.
procedures.
I would say I have a good sense for it. Can you explain kind of all the spectrum of interventional radiology, like, and get into detail, like what does it actually like entail?
Oh yeah. So broad strokes, it's a field that just does minimally invasive image-guided procedures. So it could be anything done with an ultrasound, anything done with CT, anything done with what we call fluoro, which is where basically taking a video under X-ray to see where your tools are, where your wires are. And so a lot of what gets done in IR just gets done either through feeding a catheter into a vein or an artery. So basically, a catheter is just a tube that you stick into the body. You can do things through the skin instead of necessarily having to open someone up. And so obviously there are some things that have to be done with surgery, but there's some things that if you can do the less invasive route and still get the same result, that's usually where interventional radiology comes in.
And that's always the great debate between surgeons and interventional people, because it's not just radiology. Radiology is a big part of it, but it's not purely in radiologist. Is always the debate of can the minimally invasive procedure be done as well as the surgery? If the answer is yes, then everyone should unanimously agree that's the better option.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is you've got surgeons who are trying to protect their interests, and they're saying, no, the surgery is better. It's better for the patient. It'll get a better result. And then you've got the interventional people that are like, you're an idiot. It can be done minimally invasive with the same effectiveness. But as long as once you agree on effectiveness, it's a no-brainer, right? Minimally invasive is generally a better option for every patient. I can't really think of a clear like contradiction to that paradigm, but in general, right?
Yeah.
As long as the clinical outcome can be achieved minimally invasively, it's always the better option.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and like you have just less risk if you can do it less invasively. For instance, sometimes you might not need to put someone under general anesthesia, which is usually
That's
safe,
true.
but comes with its own risks depending on the patient.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, anesthesia is one of the biggest risks to consider
Mm-hmm.
in, especially like in brain surgery or spine surgery. When we're getting clearance for a patient to undergo surgery, it's not like we're not really worried about like, oh, can their brain handle it? Can their spine handle it? It's like, are they gonna have a complication from anesthesia because they have a bad heart or they have a lung problem or whatever the case is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things we really want to know. And that's why, at least in the neurosurgery world, rarely do we make, at least where I was training, we didn't really make medical decisions about whether or not a patient was fit for surgery. We would kind of call the hospitalists or depending on like what the or cardiologist even, and basically ask them like, hey, are their heart and lungs able to undergo anesthesia? If the answer is yes, then it's like we can do the surgery. Like there's not really a brain or spine contraindication to doing surgery. So that is an important thing to to understand. The risks are rarely because of the brain or the spine. It's usually heart or lungs. But okay, so that's a nice little lay of the land of radiology. So where do you find yourself headed? More diagnostic, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think diagnostic, like the ones that really appeal to me most are neuroradiology and musculoskeletal. So like with
I can definitely
neuroradiology,
neuroradiology is definitely better, but go on.
I'm sure you have no bias there.
None whatsoever.
Yeah. Coming into it, like when you first start out in radiology residency, say neuroradiology has the steepest learning curve by far. And
Really?
so at the start, it's definitely the most intimidating
Interesting.
because,
Okay, go on. I
like,
have a
unless you
very
go back
different
like
experience,
first or
but
second
go
year of
on.
med school, that was probably when most people understood neuroanatomy the best, like when they had actually taken it. Then you go through the rest of med school and then through intern year. And unless you're doing neurospecific rotations, some of that gets lost. And then you're thrown into radiology, which in the first place, when you go from intern year to radiology, at the end of intern year, you're pretty comfortable taking care of a lot of patients. Like you're good at your workflow, you know generally what needs to be done. But then you go into radiology and you basically start from zero again. It's different skill set, different workflow, different knowledge base that you need to have. And so even if you get a bit of it here and there throughout intern year and throughout medical school, it's a lot different than actually doing it. And so you're starting with that deficit. Then when you actually start learning more about neuroradiology, there's just so much to learn and so much to actually get a grasp of as far as what's normal, what's not normal, what looks like normal but really isn't, or what looks extremely abnormal but is actually just normal for that patient. So there's that baseline, and on top of all the anatomy, which, like when you're rotating through everything like every 2 weeks or 4 weeks, it's hard to like build up that base until really your second year or onwards.
By the way, if anybody out in the chat has questions for Karthik or I myself or Norty, just throw them in the chat. We'll get to them. We're just going to keep the conversation moving. I find that, I mean, I guess that's interesting because you did a non-neuro intern year. Whereas
Exactly.
my experience is the complete opposite. I was isolated from well, I don't want to say every other organ system. I did a lot of critical care.
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk about like routine medical care, it's like I don't have like the space in my brain to care about a patient's like metformin, like call the medicine team. I want to know like, are you dying and what do I need to do to keep you alive? So in many ways, it's like I could manage a patient on a ventilator and check their ABG and make adjustments to their ventilator settings. But if you're like, you have a patient with an acute asthma exacerbation, how do you treat them? I'd be like, I don't know, call medicine. Give them steroids, azithromycin. I don't know. I don't know what the treatment algorithm is, right? There's very like well thought out and researched algorithms for how to treat asthma, right? I don't know what they are. If the patient's intubated and is respiratory failure, I can keep them alive, but I can't treat basic asthma. That was like my experience. Same thing with neuroradiology. I can look at head scans, especially CTs, over and over and over and over again. I got very proficient, I would say, as an intern, because I had to send every scan. I had to take pictures of it, send it to my chief. My chief, I particularly, one of the chiefs I trained with, I thought that I spent most of my time training with. I thought he was very good, and he was very hard on me, but in the way that I responded really well to. And his thing is like, don't ever send me a scan without telling me what you see. Even if you're wrong, you need to, like, don't send me a scan and expect me to interpret it for you.
Yeah.
Send
and like
me
in
a
the first
scan.
place, if you're sending them something, if you're sending them, like, say, just a static picture of it, you need to know where the abnormality is in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times
Otherwise,
we
you're just
send
sending them,
videos.
like,
We
a
take
normal
videos of us.
brain.
We take videos of us scrolling through the axials. Like, that's a pretty standard thing to do. And then I'll send the chief the video. But I'll be like, but I'll never just send a video and, with no context. And there are interns that do it. And let me tell you, interns out there, if you're listening, tell your senior or chief what you see on the scan, because I literally have friends that are like PGY 5s and 6s that text me. They're like, this intern doesn't even try to read the scan. They get mad, even if they won't tell you. They do get mad.
And
Because
honestly,
they want you showing an effort to learn and understand.
Yeah, that's the way you learn. You have to go over it over and over and over again. The more you do, the more you're going to get comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And also just like, even like what your point about like trying to have an interpretation, like if you open up a scan as a fresh radiology resident, it's important to like try to at least have an idea of what you think is going on when you go ask someone for help. Because at least that way, if you're wrong, you at least put your money down on something, and if you're wrong, you learn more than if you had just waffled and said nothing in the first place. Like, as far as learning how to do something, you learn a lot more from your mistakes or the times when you're off base.
Exactly. So the funny thing is, like, I hated looking at anything like an abdominal CT. I was so lost. Like, I didn't remember any of that from medical school. Like, if I had a shunt patient that got like an abdominal CT, I could trace the catheter and that was about it. I could be like, that's in the peritoneum. We're good. Like, outside of that, I have no idea what's going on an abdominal scan. And like the 1 month I was in the like general surgery ICU, they'd be looking at like gunshot wounds, the abdomen, and they're like, oh my gosh, look at this perforated bowel. I'm like, it just looks like black and white.
I believe you.
I don't know what you guys are looking at. But the funny thing is, it's like the complete opposite. Because then I get called down to the trauma bay, and all these general surgeons are standing around. There's like attendings, and they're like flipping through the scan, and they're like, totally missed the brain bleed. I'm like, it's right there. They're bleeding into their brain. How do you not see that? It's like, it's just crazy. It's crazy to me. But, I mean, they probably laugh at how little I understand what's going on in an abdominal scan.
Yeah, I mean, the further you get out in your own field, the easier it is to forget about everything else.
Yeah.
So I think we're learning why there's different specialties, why, maybe focus on one body group and don't try to figure them all out. Get lost in the sauce.
Yeah, I mean, at somewhere along the line, you do need generalists. It's impossible to have everyone siloed. It is.
And like nowadays, even within radiology, there's a lot of people who just do enough general work. For instance, if they have to read for the ER, like they might be specialized in neuroradiology, but they're also reading ER scans.
Yeah.
They're reading just about everything, so they need to be comfortable with the main emergency that could walk through the door.
What do you think is harder, brain or spine?
For me right now, spine, because I've just done less
or
of it.
what should I say? What do you hate more? Or what's like, I hate. Like, if you had to choose to read a brain scan or a spine scan, what would you choose?
Brain.
Yeah, same. I hated spine imaging.
Like spine, in some ways it's simple where you just go level by level, but for me, it's not as interesting as going through the brain.
Yeah, the brain, I felt like I had. I mean, I think in general, at least where I was training, I looked at a lot more brain scans than I did spine scans. I mean, I did level 1 trauma center in Newark. I mean, just gang members being shot left and right. I mean, twice during my intern year. I'm like down in the trauma bay, just seeing like a routine consult or whatever. And like in the trauma bay next to me, the attending's got like some 17-year-old kid's chest cracked open, squeezing his heart to keep him alive, like in the trauma bay, not in the operating.
Cardiac massage.
Yeah, in the trauma bay. And they're like twice, like in 1 month. And with the same attending. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is, but if he's ever on call, I'm staying home. I don't ever want to be out in the world, because if I end up with my chest cracked open and this attending giving me a cardiac massage because he's on call, I don't want anything to do with it.
Just sign your heart while he's at it.
Yeah, might as well. Might as well stitch his initials right into my left ventricular wall.
Wasn't there some surgeon in the UK that got in trouble for that? Except he
there's
was
a
using like an
Scrubs
argon laser
episode.
to carve his initials into a liver.
That sounds insane,
I'm listening now.
but I have not heard this story before.
Yeah, it was somewhere in the news, but there was some patient of his that was getting operated on someone else for an unrelated reason. They go in there and they see this weird scarring on the liver. Man, looks like someone's writing. And then I think they find it in another patient. Then they trace both these patients back to...
He was doing it in multiple patients?
Yeah.
Not like a one-time gag?
I mean, you got to have your stamp of approval, I guess.
Oh my
Do you, though?
gosh.
Like,
That's
apparently for this guy, like, you know, Dr. John Smith was here.
Yeah,
That's
no, I think he
the
got fired and
cringiest
like
thing
caught
I've
up on
ever
assault
heard.
charges. So
That's the
definitely not something you want to
cringiest
do.
thing I've ever heard.
I want to know.
Oh.
Not to like the same level as, say, Dr. Death, but...
Yeah, that one's because I was watching a little bit about the Dr. Death, and that guy just seemed out of his mind. This one's like...
It's like very
There's-
intentional and
Yeah.
planned.
Yeah, and you're smart enough to become a doctor at that point, right? Like, at what point does it seem like a good idea to carve your initials into somebody's organs at all? I want to know why that seems like a good plan.
The answer should be at no point.
Right.
Should be.
There's a surprising lack of common sense in medicine. And I don't know, like, where it
I mean,
comes from, frankly.
there's a difference between lack of common sense and just disregard for somebody else's well-being.
Well,
And,
some of these people,
know.
man, I mean, there's an arrogance that is incomprehensible among some people. And you almost lose sight of it when you're on the inside of the institution, because it's almost like such normal behavior that you don't realize, like, it becomes normal to you because it's normal in your everyday life. So you see these like insanely arrogant people with blatant lack of respect for other people, and you learn to just be like, oh, that's just how they are. That's who they are. And the hospitals, I think, allow it to happen because they're probably big money makers. I mean, if you don't make a hospital money and you're a complete jackass, like, somebody's going to get rid of you. Right? So the only reason I can believe these people persist is because they're making somebody money that ensures that they stay employed. And then everyone else that's swimming around in the same pond, you just get so used to them that you're like, oh, that's how they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's not until you like remove yourself from that environment, like take a step back, and you're like, that's insane.
Yeah. Crazy Dr. X carving his initials into livers.
Yeah.
Just another Tuesday.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's somebody with their initials, or the name James Lou, bovied into their brain, knowing how crazy that guy is. Jeez Louise. Yeah, we did a microvascular decompression on a lady that was like 36 weeks pregnant.
Oh.
Microvascular decompression for trigeminal neuralgia. Can you please give me, so for the rest of the audience, trigeminal neuralgia is severe facial pain that comes from irritation of the nerve. In this patient's particular case, the presumption was from a blood vessel inside her head that was beating against the nerve. So it was a relatively, I don't want to call it a simple surgery. It's a clear brain surgery. it's quick, which is why in the world of neurosurgery, we tend to say it's simple, because
Routine.
things that are not simple take 12 hours. Things that take 2 or 3 hours are simple, even though there's absolutely nothing simple about this surgery. It's a skull-based procedure. It requires, like very specific micro dissection, involves micro dissection of blood vessels. Like this is not like a VP shunt, or I don't know. Is there anything simpler than a VP shunt? I mean, maybe a craniectomy, like a traumatic craniectomy. Maybe that's probably simpler than a shunt. Like this is not that, right? So please explain to me in a world like a clinical justification where a woman at 36 weeks pregnant absolutely needs to be put under anesthesia to have this surgery done, instead of being told, you know what, this sucks.
9 weeks.
You're going to have to wait like a couple more weeks until you deliver, and then we're going to take care of your facial pain. Now, don't get me wrong. There's stories out there of people who have such severe trigeminal neuralgia, they're basically like suicidal. They're like, if I can't get rid of this pain, I'm going to kill myself. But one, they live with that pain for a very long time before they get to that point. And what I can tell you is definitively that was not this patient. In fact, her pain was controlled. Her pain was controlled on medication. The surgeon convinced her to stop taking the medication. And then when she's like, oh, my pain's getting worse, he's like, well, we should do the surgery. I'm telling you, it's literal insanity. Someone fishing for a reason to do a surgery. Oof. I'm telling you, this is not like a story I heard. This is an experience,
like firsthand experience.
I took care of. I literally, to the point, I mean, like multiple people are trying to convince this person, like, do not do this surgery. And he just didn't want to hear anything about it. He just kind of kept plugging along. He's like, oh, she's in so much pain. She wants to be able to labor naturally. She's not going to be able to labor naturally if her facial pain is too much. I'm like, well, why don't you tell her to just keep taking your Lamictal? I think Lamictal, right? I get that right?
Lamotrigine?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure Lamictal. Mm-hmm. I think that's
it's a brand name,
right? For trigeminal neuralgia.
That makes sense.
Anyway, I think that's what she was taking. But the point is, so she was taking it. It was relatively well controlled. It wasn't like perfectly well controlled. It was relatively.
The only time I could see it is like if there was some contraindication in the third trimester of taking it, which.
Well, that's exactly it, right? He's like, oh, I don't think that's good for this is what the surgeon tells her. I don't think that's good for the baby. The OBGYN's like, no, it's perfectly fine for the baby. And the surgeon's like, I don't believe that. You should stop taking it. It's probably bad for your baby. So she stops taking it. And then her facial pain gets worse. And he's like, well, now we need to operate. 37 weeks pregnant.
Created a problem. Have to solve it.
Insane.
It's like, who's going to solve the problem of all these snakes I released on this plane?
What's that?
Who's going to solve the problem of me releasing these snakes everywhere? Now we have snakes. Got to fix it.
Exactly.
I can bring you some mongoose.
Exactly. And the point is, this all comes from absolutely, like, incomprehensible arrogance. It's a systemic problem among physicians. I've learned a lot in my years of continuing maturation. What I'll tell you, Karthik, I am not now the same person I was in medical school. So probably there's tons of people out there like, Ryan's insane. I think I was insane in medical school. Medical school made me insane.
You're still insane.
But there is a degree of ongoing humility that I'm continuing to reflect on and grow in as I get older. Children have an amazing way of helping you on that journey.
Mm-hmm.
But I just look back on like my time in active clinical practice and I'm just mind blown. Absolutely mind blown.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think what helped the most for me was when you start over again in radiology after doing everything else, there's no way you don't realize how little you actually know at the start. And like that has a way of humbling you from the get-go.
Well,
And then like I think it also matters like who you have to look up to, like who your mentors are.
Yeah.
And whether they also have respect for like limits of what you can or can't say based on an image. And so like if you are gung-ho about saying, oh yeah, this looks exactly like that, there'll be plenty of things to tell you, okay, this is probably that, but you have to keep your differential more broad. You have to say it could be this and this, because there are times when people gotten burned before where they thought something looked completely normal or looked definitely abnormal, and it turned out to be the opposite.
You got any questions, Josh? I've got some additional areas to take the discussion, but I want to give you an opportunity to jump in with any questions if you've got them.
You guys were talking about AI.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up.
And
next.
that's the conversation.
In.
Yeah, that's the conversation I walked into when
AI,
you guys were chatting before this.
I think if you consider the crossroads of AI and medicine, the most blatant people on the forefront of that potential impact, in my mind, is radiology. So I think if anybody is qualified to discuss sort of their perspective and opinions, or what you see the intersection of AI and medicine right now, I think it would be no one better than a radiologist.
And it's just such a hot button topic right now, and it feels like it's bleeding over into everything. But when you start hearing it bleeding over into things like medicine or radiology specifically, like that just seems a little scary for me. Like I don't want a robot diagnosing anything I need done from a medical standpoint.
Or a
robot, computer, same difference.
Two different things.
The second the machine telling me, the second the machines start knowing more than people, I'm out. All right, I don't want it. I'm good. So I'd love to just know what's going on in that space and what's actually happening, and where it could be beneficial, where it could be a little scary, because I'm scared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as far as like AI in medicine, there's a lot of different ways where it can be useful or is being used right now. So I'll start with just like within radiology. There's like the obvious part about AI reading scans, and like it's been tested for different things. It's been tested for just triaging. For instance, if you have a bunch of CTs from the ER that are on the list, you could have an AI take a quick look at each of them and say, if there's head CTs on there and it thinks there's a bleed there, bumps it up on the queue so that the radiologist reads it sooner. It's like on that side, triage.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
there are other
that's
sides
a good application.
where, like automated interpretation, which isn't, at least as far as I've seen, hasn't been used as much in a clinical setting. And that varies. There are certain things where having an AI double check your work or having it take a quick pass to see if there's anything else you should turn your attention to can be helpful. Like the obvious example I can think of day to day is when you're reading a chest x-ray or chest CT. Like you might be looking for a pneumonia for someone who's coming in with a fever and a cough and hacking up a bunch of green sputum. But you also need to be aware, it's like, oh, maybe there's this tiny nodule in the outside or the periphery of the lung that is actually a cancer. And like it's easy to get distracted by the big honking pneumonia that's on the other side. But if you miss that tiny nodule and they don't get any follow-up on it, that could turn into a cancer. If it goes long enough, it could be a metastatic cancer. And so having something there that double checks your work, makes sure that you're not missing those smaller but also still important things, I think that's really where AI has the most potential. But it's not just a simple one and done, like you get the program, you train it, you release it, and then it's ready forever.
It's replacing people at that point. You're saying it's not to that point, it's right? It's meant as almost like a safety net or a speed up.
Like there's deal. Like AI doesn't stay accurate forever in the same context, at least within radiology. So something I was just talking about with Ryan before the show was this idea of data drift, which is where when you're training a program, you're training it on a certain data set. That data set is accurate for a certain like amount of time and for a certain population of people. But when you put it in the real world, it's either going for a larger population that it's reading from, or the characteristics of the population it's reading from, or the characteristics of the machine you're using, or even the characteristics of the people ordering the tests that can change over time. And so over time, the reads of it start to become less and less accurate. So like an example, I was talking with one fellow about the place.
But that's assuming it's not continuing to learn.
So most programs, you don't really have them continue to learn. Like at least with, I think, most FDA approved applications.
Yeah, I don't think that's wrong for this world, though.
You can't re-release like something periodically without really getting it approved.
But it still needs I get what you're saying, Karthik, is it needs a baseline to learn from. And if you don't have a massive data set that you're pulling from and constantly pumping it into the AI, it can't continue to learn accurately. Like say the entire demographic of that specific hospital changes for whatever reason, right? And now you're seeing a whole different set of people coming in. How is it going to diagnose that? They're going to
be learning from the global population before we know it. They're going to be taking in real-time data, and they're going to be adjusting in real time faster than
with medical records. I don't know if I see that happening as quickly as other things.
I think right now,
is a huge. What do you think Apple's doing with all your healthcare information? Apple is literally stealing everyone's healthcare information right now. They're probably training a super doctor, AI super doctor. Steve Jobs isn't dead. He's just underground in a
thought you didn't want to be diagnosed by robots.
Yeah,
he's being kept alive by robots underground. Tim Cook is a pawn. Steve Jobs is stealing everyone's healthcare data, using AI to comb through it and create a cure for pancreatic cancer. Or he's already created a cure for pancreatic cancer.
He's just walking the streets and no one even knows.
I don't know. Maybe he's trying to kill everybody.
The carrot juice?
For tax purposes.
Strictly for tax purposes.
Yeah. I mean, data's out of control these days.
Mm-hmm. The key thing is you also have to train it on a good data set because like there's a very common phrase that gets tossed around when you're dealing with AI. Garbage in, garbage out. You can have a large data set, but if it's not accurately trained, it's not accurately labeled, then you're just training the AI on crap data.
Right.
Yeah.
It actually takes a lot of time, especially in medicine, to get a good data set. Something that's well-labeled, that's standardized enough that the AI can actually learn from it.
These things are going to be pulling data in real time before we know it. You're not going to be relying on like the national inpatient sample or yada, yada, yada. It's just give it a matter of time. Google's like making AI that's like nearing like sentience and all this crazy stuff. And you're telling me, well, we're not going to have supercomputers that are just processing healthcare information in real time?
That are capable of it? Yes. But if the AI is just learning on what the AI's already read, how is it supposed to advance itself?
It's going to read. Well, it's going to have the ability to literally read every scan that's ever been digitized ever and saved in the history of mankind.
If you can manage to get every hospital system to cooperate to that extent, I'd be impressed.
I think that's the
right
key
now.
there.
I don't think
you'd be impressed. I'll give you a scenario right now. Okay, hold on. Let me get. I can actually like make a tinfoil hat and like leave it next to my desk so I can put it on whenever we get on these rants. I'm gonna paint you Dr. Rad's tinfoil hat scenario right now. This is what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, at least everybody has a COVID vaccine that has whatever that metallic compound in it. Once 5G goes live around the world, they're going to, through Wi-Fi, download everyone's real-time healthcare data, and the machines are going to be learning your biometrics in real time. Boom.
Going to steal your precious bodily fluids?
It's a direct connection. The COVID vaccine is going to give them direct Wi-Fi connection to your biometrics through 5G.
I'm not going to rule it out.
Exactly. You know? I'm telling you. And then the AI machines are going to learn better than any doctor's medical decision making. That's how it's going down.
The fact that I'm just an AI.
You might be. Karthik might be.
My last name is actually ChatGPT.
I mean, I've never seen you in real life, so definitely could just be a computer screen.
How do you test whether somebody's real or not? Are there like
there's a Turing test,
to ask
which
them?
is supposed to be like a test that you use to determine whether someone's a machine or not.
Yeah.
I
Did
don't
you hear
remember
about that
exactly how you
lady
do
that?
it, but
Did you hear about the lady on the American? Is it American Airlines? Is it fairly recently? Josh saw this.
This
Did you
was
hear
brought
about
to
this
my
lady?
attention. Yeah.
Literally hysterical lady. They had to like deboard the plane, or like bring the plane back to the gate to let the lady off the plane. She was so hysterical because she was convinced the person sitting next to her was a cyborg, was not real.
No, I thought it was a lizard person. I thought they
I don't
blinked
know the details.
sideways.
She was convinced it was not a real person, and therefore, like, absolutely hysterical, had to get off the plane. I'm telling you,
maybe she just really didn't want to go wherever she was going.
the machines are coming, not just for our jobs. They're coming for our way of life.
As a machine, I can't deny that.
See? See? We got him. We got him. When was your birthday?
It's coming up in a couple months.
Uh-huh. Can machines have birthdays?
They have like creation.
Yeah, like
dates.
when did Skynet go live?
I don't know. Take us to your maker.
It's just AIs all the way down.
I see. All right. So we've talked about medicine and AI. We've determined that Karthik is a robot or a lizard. Are you a robot or a lizard person?
Why
Can you
can't I do
can you
both?
shapeshift?
That's
Not
a
on
great question.
camera. Only when
Okay.
no one's watching.
That makes sense.
Only
Yeah,
when
that
no
checks out.
one's watching. Okay. That's in line with Richie the Barber.
Yeah, that one.
That
absolutely
guy's
checks out.
crazy, man.
Don't ever
I
send me
haven't
that
seen
person
any of
again.
his clips in a long time. Karthik, if
Thank
you want to get a
goodness.
laugh, go look up Richie the Barber.
Richie
Don't-
the Barber?
He's a
Don't-
complete freak
don't do
show. But like it's one of those, like, you know, you're like watching a good train wreck, but you like can't take your eyes off of it, even though you know it's just only bad things. That is everything about this guy on YouTube. But every time his videos come up, like, I can't help myself but to click on them.
Well, you'll send them to me, and I'm like, I don't want to watch this. And then I'll still click on it just to see what he's saying.
Exactly.
I'm like, I don't
Morbid
want any part of
curiosity.
this. Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So we've talked about radiology as a field, a little bit about your experience as a resident,
Mhm.
AI and medicine. Any other like hot topics you want to talk about, Karthik? I mean,
Ooh.
we can get like way off the beaten path and talk about video games and just general life stuff. It doesn't have to all be about medicine and brain and spine stuff, but I want to give
Video
you,
game
before
wise.
we completely digress, I want to give you the opportunity to dive in with anything you want to talk about.
Yeah, video game wise, I've been getting a lot more into the indie game scene. So
Do tell.
yeah, got an Xbox. Like the main ones I played recently that I've loved: Hollow Knight, Hades, both fantastic.
What genre games are these? What are
So
we talking?
Hades is a
Describe the
roguelite.
game.
They're like
The idea is that
platformers.
it's a game where it's intentionally very difficult, and you go through, and the game design is based around you dying over and over again and starting from the beginning. And you lose most of what you gain throughout the run, but you gain some upgrades that make each subsequent run a little bit easier. And so it's built around the idea that you're going to die, you're going to get more skilled at it, but you're also going to get some upgrades that help you progress. And sometimes the story is based around you dying over and over again. Like Hades, for example, the idea is that you play as Zagreus, son of Hades. You're trying to escape from the underworld, and you literally can't die because you are the son of Hades. And so every time you die, you just get sent back to your house. You walk out of the pool, and you try again. But it's
Sounds like a
interesting.
miserable existence.
So they do comment on that. But the idea is that they're just so used to it that that's what's normal for them. But also, that's what drives the story forward. Each time you go back, you get new dialogue with all the characters there. You advance the story. You learn more about like why you're trying to escape, who's helping you, who's against you.
Can you
So that
beat
keeps it
these
interesting.
games?
But also, I think the key thing that makes it fun is that each run ends up being so different from the last run. because the Olympian gods are trying to help you escape. And so every so often, you'll get a power up from one of them as you're going through each run. And they can combo off each other in very interesting ways. And then when you do a new run, it'll be a completely different set of powers that you get. So part of it is just learning to adapt to each run with each different ability you get and still like making it through.
Yeah, that game was very well received.
Yeah, they're supposed to be coming out to the sequel this year, next year.
Any competitive games on your palette?
Not right now, actually.
Okay. What about these are all games you're playing on Xbox? These are all Xbox games. Gotcha.
One thing I'm really looking forward to though is Starfield. That looks sick.
Which one is that?
Spaceships, Mark Hamill.
Pretty much.
Yeah. That's all I know about it.
Some old school Blizzard employees that started their own studio announced like one of their first creations. It's basically like a mashup of Warcraft 3 and StarCraft. So it's kind of like it has more of that fantasy vibe in terms of the environment, but then it's like a bunch of StarCraft units. And they've just introduced some new like RTS mechanics where
I was going to ask if it's an RTS.
It's an RTS where you can like destroy terrain and like kind of manipulate the map a little bit.
Yeah, it's like how do you really build off of StarCraft and what that did for RTSs?
Yeah. So they basically like you can like chop down trees and apparently you can also so now you can move units. This is another thing that's interesting. You can move units like through terrain. But the ability to do that is limited based on the size of the unit. So like if you want to go through a forest, like maybe a bunch of marksmen can just like run through the trees. But if you have like a big giant like Meccano Strider thing, like it can't fit through the trees. So that was kind of an interesting progression of the RTS genre. So a little bit more like interaction with the actual environment is really the way I took away from it. But it was a little weird.
It's going to be big enough to like really set it apart or like really draw people in.
I don't think people like playing RTSs these days.
There's still a handful that are out there. Like there's XCOM, I think was like the most recent big one, and then Marvel Midnight Suns, I think is actually an RTS, which looked really cool. I used to love RTSs. I couldn't tell you last time I played one.
I mean, people loved RTSs when they were novel and they were the only thing that existed.
Right.
I think
games
once
just evolved.
MOBAs came out,
that
was so much more accessible to people competitively.
Yeah, because it gave you more control over your units instead of just like go there, do whatever you're gonna do, right?
Yeah, I mean, micro is a big component of competitive RTS gaming, but
and also just how many actions per minute can you do? Like, do you want to sit there training yourself to do however many hundreds of actions per minute it takes to actually compete against anybody remotely good?
I think there's something that came out fairly recently where it wasn't any actual competition. It's just whoever could complete the actions the fastest would win. And that was it. Like that's all it came down to. And if you could just train yourself to do exactly what you needed to do, given a situation, you weren't actually adapting or competing outside of just those mechanical button presses.
That's interesting.
Which is weird when you think about it. When you really think about it, it's very strange.
Yeah, I think overall people prefer
action versus that.
I don't know. There's something to be said.
I guess that is
about,
an action.
Like, I think there's something to be said about like using how your brain focuses on like a central character and moving quickly and rapidly and doing as many things as you can at once. Because I mean, theoretically, you could probably make the argument that APMs in a MOBA, like a good top tier MOBA player, their APMs are probably just as high or up there for top tier RTS players. right? Because but it's not all centered around unit movement, right?
It's also moving parts to keep track of if you're playing StarCraft versus League of Legends. I think you'd be more limited by your cooldowns than anything else, wouldn't you?
And there's a lot more variables. I feel like is the biggest differentiator is you have to take into account what's right in front of you and what's happening versus just memorizing what to do to have a higher output than somebody else. You can't just constantly mash things faster than everybody else and always win. You have to.
I mean, that's not the case for RTS, but
I mean,
RTS chess.
That was a big thing, like auto chess. Oh,
I don't know much about auto chess.
Well, that's basically what Teamfight Tactics was. But what I'm saying is, I think it came out that if somebody was just doing more actions than somebody else in StarCraft, they would just win no matter what. Like that's what I'm saying is, I think if it was just sheer output, like you would win. And I was like, well, if you think about it that way, I could be making this up too. I could be a robot that was trained on bad data, but I think I read something about that. There's always a chance.
Probably are.
But that's why I feel like the ability to have to critically think and adapt to what's in front of you is what makes games more fun nowadays. You're not limited to things you used to be limited to. You can play against other people. You have to adapt. You have to think critically on how to.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, right? People want to use their brain more than their mechanical abilities.
Especially as we get older.
But I think you have to have some mechanical ability. Nobody wants to play like a board game.
Right.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I love board games.
I mean the right board game, right setting, sure. I'm not like a nut for board games like some people are, but yeah, I mean we'll have to get you on the PC gaming train, Karthik, so you can come play some League of Legends Arena with us. That's been our latest indulgence.
How far down the rabbit hole do you think I would go?
Do you have a computer that can run it?
It's like one of the new MacBooks.
Oh, gosh. You got another MacBook guy here. No, I'm just kidding. We actually have I wouldn't call him a good friend. He's a friend.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually a terrible friend, but he's a friend nonetheless, who got a brand new computer to like bragging about how much he spent on the computer. Steve, if you're out there watching this, I'm not even trying to hide this from you. I want you to hear every word that's coming out of my mouth, Steve. He's like bragging about how much money he spent on this computer. And I was like, well, what kind of computer do you get? And he's like, he wouldn't tell me. It was like in that moment, I knew he bought a laptop.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, either that or he bought a Mac. One of the two.
I think I called him out. I was like,
something
you
that
buy
he
a Mac, did
couldn't tell you with a straight face.
Well, because
he was just being weird and like would refuse to tell us like what kind of computer he bought, but he was bragging about how much he spent.
And he had been telling us for weeks or months. He's like, I'm finally gonna have a computer. We can finally play Valorant or Counter-Strike. I'm like, yes. And then he's like, you're not gonna be happy when I tell you what kind of computer. I'm like, you have to tell me, and you have to tell me right now. And then he wouldn't for days. And then all of a sudden he says something. I'm like, he didn't buy a Mac. Like those games don't run on Mac. I was like, I might kill him.
He bought a Mac laptop. Like, bruh, I mean, if that's what you want, fine. Why are you going around bragging like you spent all this money on a computer so you can play video games? That's the worst video game computer you could have possibly bought. I'm not saying it's a bad computer. I'm not shaming Mac users. I am. But if you... I mean, to some degree, I was a Mac user for a long time, but the reality is like
great computers, but games are not optimized to run on Mac. Yeah, it's not open source.
And honestly, I think they really sucked. Around like 2016 was the last time I bought a Mac, and I bought a souped up Mac. I thought it was awesome. That thing was crap in the bed, speed wise. It was so slow. By like 2018, I mean, I got 2 good years out of that. I bought a Windows laptop and far outperformed my souped up Mac desktop. Once that happened, I said, I'm just going to buy Windows. And I've been very pleased with my Windows machines ever since then.
Yeah. Usually end up getting about 6-ish years out of each of my Macs.
Yeah, usually that's what they're known for. They last
I mean,
forever.
here's the thing: you can get a Mac to last a long time.
Depends on what you're using.
Problem is, it's like I don't want it to last a long time with its level of performance.
Mm-hmm.
See, I don't run a computer until it blows up in my face. I run a computer until its performance is like intolerable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And my level of intolerable is much higher than probably the average person. I do all kinds of things with my computer, not just video games. I do a lot of Adobe stuff. I do a lot of, it's admittedly a little bit easier because so much software is cloud-based now. But even cloud-based software puts strain on the computer when you're running multiple programs at a time. And the time it takes, even just flipping between tabs, between programs, like a program that's already open. Like if I'm literally clicking from one screen to the next, if you're bouncing back and forth between things and something slows down, oh my goodness, it's so painful. I feel like as a radiologist, you would like not want to use a Mac either. Wouldn't I feel like a radiologist would be like a very pro Windows person.
So for actually just reading at home, a lot of it you can do through a VPN, so it doesn't really matter whether it's a Mac or Windows.
Yeah, but I would tend to think you could get a better monitor.
I mean, yeah, like the monitor is what matters the most probably, and also just having multiple screens. But most computers, I feel like they'd be able to run the software just fine. Like if I have to look up images from home, I can do that, no problem.
Yeah, but when you want like a fatty graphics card,
you don't actually really need a graphics card for a lot of fancy graphics card for a lot of radiology stuff because it's not like you're
just
actively having to render stuff. Like these are static images that get sent over from a server, so it's not like you have to actively process new terrain or respond to the actions of somebody else in a game. It's images.
It's just an image. It's just got to be. I'm sure it's a high resolution image.
Yeah,
you just got to have the monitor for it.
Your GPU doesn't help you with that.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess you're right. Radiology is not as fancy as we think it is. It sounds very fancy and techy, but
that was one of the
using like Polaroids.
We're actually just using Casio watches to do all of our calculations.
Well, that was one thing I did want to ask about radiologies. Have there been any like new advancements or crazy technologies over?
Yeah. No, like even like going back to the whole AI train, there's been a lot of work about trying to reduce the time it takes to acquire an MRI image or MRI with AI techniques.
Mm-hmm.
So like learning how you can sample the same thing fewer times, but still get the same accuracy of data collected. So like cutting down the scan time of certain things from say 30 minutes down to 20 or 10 or even less than that. There's a lot of things being done with, for instance, certain biologic tracers to image very specific things. Like, Ryan, if you have someone with a meningioma, like used to be you would just CT them, MRI them more likely, but to look at recurrence like in a surgical site, now they have dotatate PETs for that. Very specific tracers that happen to be good at very specific things.
Yeah.
Like when you're talking about using, for instance, a PET scan to try to localize something, if you're looking for a certain type of cancer, some types of cancers you can see really well with it. Other types, like say prostate, there could be a lot of things that you're missing, whereas now there's these new tracers that are just very good at going to specific cells, binding to specific cells, and just showing you a lot more than you could see before.
So that's cool.
That's one area where a lot of things are happening. And then even within other fields, it's just incremental improvements, but things that make a huge difference compared to 10 or 20 years ago.
Do academic radiology departments have a lot of MD PhDs on staff doing these kinds of research with like labs and things like that?
Depending on the field, if it's more research heavy, which there can be a decent amount of research in each one. I feel like, for instance, molecular imaging, which used to be called nuclear medicine, I think that tends to have more MD PhDs, depending on...
They changed the name of nuclear medicine. It's called molecular medicine now.
Yeah, molecular imaging.
I feel like we still just call it nuclear medicine.
Nuclear's got a...
Colloquially, that's what everybody calls it, but...
Yeah. The medicine practiced by Putin.
Nuclear has...
nuclear medicine.
There's a
Take
bad
it.
vibe
It's good
around it
for
now.
you.
Yeah.
Good for you. Nuclear medicine.
Mm-hmm. No polonium involved in this medicine.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. All right. Well, it's 8 o'clock. I'm pretty gassed. Anybody got anything else they want to talk about before we wind down? I'm going to take that brief pause. Well, that's
What is that?
interesting.
Tornado sirens. Emergency
Oh, really?
warning, I think. Or not sirens. It's my phone. My phone is not a tornado siren.
I see.
But
Well,
it's a weather alert. There we go. Words are
for a
hard.
tornado?
Yeah.
All right.
It
Well,
won't-
on
it
that note, I guess we should
I guess
probably
it's a good
wrap
time
up
to-
before.
I think you need
hunker
to go
down.
duck in the hallway, just like in the good old tornado drills in elementary school.
Yep.
Yeah,
Get under the
before
desk. The desk will
Norty
save
gets
you.
swept off to the land of Oz.
Mm-hmm. Or ain't in
Um,
Kansas anymore.
Yeah. On that note, Karthik, thanks for joining us tonight. I had a blast. Let's do this
Thanks for
again.
having me.
We'll definitely just hang and chat and catch us up on the radiology world, or I don't know, maybe crazy current events in medicine. I think I got an email. I don't know, something wild. Oh yeah, which specialties have the unhappiest marriages? There's no shortage of discussion topics in medicine. It's a crazy institution. We are going to be going on summer break. So this is our last episode for a couple weeks. Possibly, I would say, what are we, mid-July? We'll probably take a good 6-week break and come back roughly first week of September. Norty and I, we got to regroup. We got to do some planning for future episodes, put some new, fresh ideas down on paper. I think a summer break is good for everyone. And, we'll be back fresh, ready to rock and roll. Any closing thoughts to the chat, Norty, before we kind of wrap up for our summer break?
No, I appreciate you joining us, Karthik. It was a pleasure. It was super fun. So I appreciate it. I know Ryan mentioned he does as well. But
I think when we come back
yeah.
from... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, we mentioned board games. I want everybody to pick a favorite board game.
Ooh.
And share it.
Recently, it's been Wingspan.
I know what that
Basically, this engine building game where you're playing as someone trying to fill up a bird preserve with different birds. Different birds have different abilities. Like you can put down a bald eagle, you can put down pelicans, you can put down just about any bird you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds just like a very tame game, but there are just so many combos and so many possibilities that you can do with it. Also, the artwork's just beautiful. Aside from that, I do like the other like social games like Avalon, where you're playing with your friends. Different people are evil, different people are good. You have no idea who's who, like in Mafia or Werewolf. And you're just trying to accuse your friends while staying hidden.
Or just accuse everyone.
Super fun arguments.
Oh, yeah. That's my type of board game.
That sounds like a game we should play with Steve, except by default, he has to be the evil one every time. And we would just be like, it's you!
Well, we used to go over to my buddy's house and play Monopoly, and nothing made me and my other friend more happy than doing back alley trades to collude against our other friend until he got pissed and kicked us out of his mom's basement. So that was the best time I ever had.
I mean, the purpose of Monopoly is to destroy families.
Yep.
So I feel like you're using it.
Yep. That's the real world. That's business, right?
That makes sense.
There's no rules and regulations in business. Okay.
That checks out. That checks out. Although we've been pretty bad about this, but obviously the reason we do our stream every week is not to, advance neuroscience in any way, or sure, it's all for the greater good, right? But really it's to just have fun, and at the end of it, plug and promote awareness for veterans with brain and spine injuries and illnesses. So if anybody out in the audience, as we wind down before our summer break, between now and next, season, I don't really like calling it seasons. We're just kind of, taking a rest and recuperation break since we're just grind away at doing this show every week. Scan the QR code, go to our website, brainandspinegroup.org, make a donation to support our nonprofit programs that support veterans with brain and spine injuries and illnesses. Brain and Spine Group is a registered 501c3, so all your donations are tax deductible. So I do just want to throw that in for anybody. Obviously, donating is not an obligation. We're just glad that anybody comes, enjoys the show, the conversation, chimes into the chat. David, we appreciate your gratitude. Thanks for coming to the show. It's always great seeing new names in the chat, knowing that people are out there just kind of having fun with us, right? We're not here promoting a message. We're not here, I don't know, trying to sell a product, right? We're not, hustling, trying to make a dollar. We're honestly just trying to have a good time. That's what the Rad and Norty show is all about. If we can bring some brain and spine education and topical discussions into the mix, great. If we end up talking about video games the whole time, that's cool with me too. That being said, when we do come back from the break, we're going to kick it off. I think this is a fair statement to make, although don't hold me to anything because it's a crazy world. World War III could kick off next week. All it takes is like Putin plowing through Ukraine and like meeting up in Turkey. And, there's plenty of geopolitical spice going around these days to have no idea what things are going to look like in September. Anyway, the plan should be and will be to kick things off with our deep dive into the MK Ultra mind control program.
That's what I was thinking.
You know anything about that, Karthik?
No, isn't that the CIA back in, was it the 40s, 50s?
I mean, apparently it's still ongoing. They just sort of said it was.
Oh, it never stopped. Oh, yeah.
But yes, it's a CIA program. Apparently insane accounts of people being able to remote view. Anyway, we're going to do a bunch of background research between now and when we come back in September. And when we come back in September, we hope you all join us. We're going to talk about MK Ultra and what we know about the conspiracy of the deep state trying to hack and track the human mind. All right. On that note, Rad, Norty, Karthik, we are out. We'll see you all in September. Don't go anywhere too far, but have a great rest of your summer, everyone. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Peace.